Hello and welcome to NTD News Today. Kevin Hogan here. Let's take a look at our top stories. President Biden meeting with G7 leaders on Afghanistan, while U.S. lawmakers start investigating what went wrong. And evacuations increase with the deadline just a week away. As America continues talks with the Taliban, many wonder how the country was taken over so quickly. A Navy reservist shares his perspective on Afghanistan's sudden collapse. Moderate Democrats in the House and Senate team up to try to pull their party more towards the center. What could it mean for Biden's agenda? A group of Utah parents fighting in favor of mask mandates. They're suing the state over a law that bans the requirement. This, while Republican officials claim there are downsides to kids wearing masks at school. President Biden is meeting with G7 leaders today on Afghanistan. Allies are expected to push him to extend the evacuation past the August 31st deadline. Meanwhile, U.S. lawmakers are reviewing what went wrong. NTD's Jessica Beatty reports.
Lawmakers are examining the flaws in the U.S. departure from Afghanistan. Chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, says they had the first of many hearings Monday.
Today we had witnesses from a cross-section of the intelligence agencies come review their holdings with us. We view this, as I said during the hearing, as the beginning of vigorous oversight of what went wrong.
Another Democrat on the Intelligence Committee says he agreed with both Trump and Biden that the U.S. should withdraw, but he says it shouldn't have gone down like this. And we're far from out of the woods yet.
We'll tell you this, which is that I've been watching this intelligence for a very long time, and our intelligence community has been appropriately pessimistic about what was going on in Afghanistan. Now, what we don't know is if they sounded the alarm loudly enough.
The U.S. military reported its biggest day of evacuation flights out of Afghanistan by far on Monday. But White House reporter Jonathan Lemire with the Associated Press says it's not all good news.
There's been increased reports of terrorists, an Islamic State offshoot, targeting both the Taliban, but also Americans and Afghan citizens trying to get out of the country.
The U.S. has helped evacuate about 37,000 people, mostly Afghan evacuees. More arrived in the United States Monday, landing in Northern Virginia before being taken to a temporary housing center.
Sir, how does it feel to be here?
Till now, we are safe.
Biden says no evacuees are coming directly to the U.S. without prior screening. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has said he believes most, if not all, evacuations could be done by the end of August.
He appears very cautiously hedged whether or not there would be an extension or not, likely for fear of inflaming the Taliban further. So that is going to be something to watch.
The Taliban warned Monday that there would be consequences if the U.S. doesn't withdraw all troops by August 31st. Jessica Beatty, NTD News.
Sources say CIA Director William Burns met with a Taliban leader Monday. Officials have confirmed they're in contact with the Taliban, but have not named exactly which leaders are talking. Monday's meeting took place in Kabul. It marks the highest level direct exchange of views in the process so far. Other meetings are also taking place in Doha, Qatar. The Biden administration has faced questions on whether it can get them all out by the August 31st withdrawal deadline. A Pulitzer Prize-winning photographer who escaped Kabul is calling on Western countries to scale up evacuations. He warns that the Taliban will commit atrocities as they consolidate their power. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
Masoud Hosseini got on the last commercial flight to Istanbul on August 15th. Now he's in the Netherlands, but he voiced concern for those still trapped in Afghanistan.
It is started already. We have some reports from some human rights activists that they'll start killing Hazara men. This is genocide.
Hosseini said the Taliban did the same when they were in power in 1996 to 2001. And that any idea they will behave differently now and not promote their ideology abroad is a delusion.
This time it's not something that they stay there. They start funding other groups or other activities in the world. You won't be, safe in Den Haag or Paris or, DC or anywhere else.
Hosseini estimates that up to 200,000 people in the country of 35 million should be evacuated immediately. And not only those that assisted U.S. and NATO troops directly, but public critics of the Taliban as well, including human rights activists, academics, and journalists.
So I kind of really scared because, Taliban can find me easily, right? And they would kill me by probably torturing me. That's something that I know, because they are not human, I think. They look like human, but they're not.
Hosseini won the 2012 Pulitzer Prize for breaking news photography. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Now we hear from the captain of Afghanistan's women's wheelchair basketball team. She arrived in Spain after fleeing from Kabul, where she encountered the Taliban in the chaos at Kabul's airport.
The Taliban left an impact early on Afghan basketballer Nilufar Bayat. In an instant, they changed her life forever. Bayat was just 2 years old when a rocket hit her house in Kabul, injuring her spinal cord.
The bad memory I had, it was about Taliban, because they came, they changed my life, they changed his life. They came and put it non-stoppable pain in our life, a permanent disability that we will have this in whole life.
In the wake of the Taliban's takeover last week, she joined the thousands desperate to leave the country. For days, she and her husband Ramesh waited amid the chaos at Kabul's airport.
Taliban are shooting around and it's too difficult. They are shouting, even they don't hear what we say. We had a very difficult time, but now fortunately I'm here with Ramesh and just sitting and we are waiting.
In recent years, Bayat was hopeful things were changing in Afghanistan. She was part of a generation that enjoyed freedoms for women with access to education and work. She and her husband, who was also injured by a mine, wanted to stay in the capital, Kabul, and keep improving the country. But their dreams were cut short.
They would destroy all the wishes and all the achievements, all what we did in the last 20 years. In Afghanistan, we had too many wishes. Like I was thinking about to improve for my basketball, with my job, with my studies, this all.
Now she has been offered to play for a wheelchair basketball team in the northern Spanish city of Bilbao. Thanks to the Spanish government and the Spanish Basketball Federation, she was given a place on a plane out of Kabul, arriving to safety on Friday. Although she is safe in Spain, her heart is still in Afghanistan.
I want to tell them that you are so strong that you are still there. We know living in Afghanistan is not easy. We pray from here for them to be safe. And please, don't give up. And don't accept all the rules of Taliban, because if you accept today, they will put another rule tomorrow.
There are many questions surrounding the Afghan military and why it fell so quickly to the Taliban. NTD's Jason Perry found out more behind the sudden collapse in an exclusive interview with a Navy reservist and veteran of the war in Afghanistan.
Petty Officer Michael Castleberry said he saw no obvious signs that the Afghan military would give in to the Taliban.
To fight along with us, because there's a couple of times where we got in TICs, which is troops in contact, where we would fight along next to the Afghan army, and they seemed like they were actually, you know, ready to go, and you know, they seemed like they had a reason to fight.
One of the interpreters Castleberry worked with in Afghanistan immigrated to the United States in 2014. That interpreter visited Castleberry recently and gave him some news of why the Taliban was able to take over so quickly.
He came by and we were just talking about it, and he actually said that he talked to his cousin, who's still back in Afghanistan, in Ghazni, and his cousin said the soldiers, the troops there were told, do not fight. You know, they were told by, and I was like, are you serious? And he's like, yeah. I said, well, it's kind of funny because you don't hear that on the news. You don't, you know, that their leadership told them do not fight against the Taliban. That's why you don't see any, you know, you didn't see any troops or anybody. That's why it was so fast for them to overtake a lot of those districts.
Castleberry was watching the news with his father recently when he saw a scene of forward operating base Ghanzi in Afghanistan. He was once deployed there. Where the American and Polish flags used to be raised up, now had Taliban flags flying overhead. The Navy reservist was hurt to see that, and he said it felt like a kick to the stomach. He said it's hard not to feel like those who died for nothing, but he has a message for troops who are taking it pretty hard.
Confide in each other, because right now that's all we have is each other. And I tell you, the closest family that I've had in a long time were those guys that I served with over there. And we went through a lot. Luckily, thank God, we didn't lose anybody while we were out there. Unfortunately, we did have one that committed suicide when they got back home. But, and a lot of that is still, it sticks with you. And it's to just find something that you could do to take your mind off of it. I tell people, hey, just stay away from the news.
According to a study done by Boston University, about 4 times as many troops have died by suicide than in actual combat in post 9/11 war operations. Jason Perry, NTD News.
If you or someone you know are thinking about suicide, please call 800-273-8255, or for more information, please visit suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Moderate Democrats in the Senate are reportedly joining forces with their allies in the House, trying to pull the party towards the center. It could impact President Biden's agenda. NTD's Jessica Beatty explains.
Democratic Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema are reportedly advising 9 House moderates who threatened to derail the $3.5 trillion budget plan. Axios reported the news, citing lawmakers and aides. The senators are advising the caucus on how to negotiate with President Biden. He wants both the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the budget resolution to be passed together. And House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and progressives agree. But the 9 House moderates say that could take months. Instead, they want to quickly pass the more traditional infrastructure bill first and then look at the $3.5 trillion budget plan. Earlier this month, the 9 lawmakers wrote, "With the livelihoods of hardworking American families at stake, we simply can't afford months of unnecessary delays and risk squandering this once-in-a-century bipartisan infrastructure package." They said they won't consider the budget resolution until the $1.2 trillion bill is passed. But that puts Pelosi in a tough position. She can only afford to lose 3 Democratic votes. If she loses support from either progressives or moderates, the legislation will fail to pass. Axios reports one possible solution: Pelosi could promise moderates a vote on the smaller bill by the end of next month. That could assure them they won't have to wait for the Senate to finalize the budget. Jessica Beatty, NTD News.
Senator Ed Markey from Massachusetts is pushing a little-known bill that would fight guns made through 3D printing. Under the law, sharing firearm schematics for 3D printers would be a criminal act. Critics of firearms produced with 3D printers call them ghost guns because they lack serial numbers and are difficult for law enforcement to trace. Markey's bill would solidify federal rules against the distribution of 3D gun files. The bill alleges these schematics increase the risk that people legally prohibited from owning guns could obtain them easily through printing. A spokesman for the Libertarian Party told the Epoch Times the bill is impractical and could only be enforced with communist levels of interference in people's lives. An update on Arizona's latest 2020 election audit: the cybersecurity firm reviewing ballots for Maricopa County is set to present their findings to Republicans today, but some Democrats are casting doubt before the report's release. Just part of the review is expected to reach lawmakers' hands today, after a COVID outbreak among the auditors at Cyber Ninjas. And the findings won't immediately be made public either. Regardless, state Democrats are trying to cast doubt on the results, whatever they might be. Arizona Secretary of State Katie Hobbs, in an online meeting, said the audit is an effort to continue to sow doubt in the 2020 presidential election. Republicans in the state Senate launched the review in an effort to address claims of election irregularities and fraud in the last presidential election. Tennessee residents rescued in weekend floods remember the moment the disaster arrived. Humphreys County now seeks support to help find those still missing and help survivors recover.
We just about didn't make it out. We just about floated back. But as we was driving out, we could see these people on their porches. And I think in my mind that they thought they were safe, that the water was not going to get that high. But from what I've heard, it gushed at them. I never in my life seen that much water. I seen it on TV, and I thought I was blown. I was screaming and hollering for help.
There was 2 babies that got killed, 2 twins, and then 2 more got killed. 4 babies got killed in that apartment. And then the mama, it was in 11B, she got killed. There was about 6 people that got killed there.
The outpour of love, the outpour of helping us what our needs are, it's coming in. And right now, our people, we've got law enforcement and that and our EMS stuff at a pretty good place right now due to some of those outside agencies supporting it, but our people need help. We're going to be overwhelmed for the next probably 30 days at least, overwhelmed.
Record rainfall of up to 17 inches drenched some areas, leading to massive flooding on Saturday afternoon and evening. The hardest hit area was the Humphreys County town of Waverly. It's about 55 miles west of Nashville. Hundreds of homes were left uninhabitable. Local officials say rescuers are going house to house and digging through rubble for about 40 missing people. 5 or 6 teams of rescuers are searching through the destruction. Some are using dogs trained to find people. The Tennessee governor said he would request emergency assistance from the federal government in the next few days. President Joe Biden said federal emergency officials will coordinate with the state. A legal challenge in Utah. Parents are suing the state over a law that prevents school districts from imposing mask mandates, but Republican officials often say parents should be the ones to decide whether their kids wear masks all day. The legal challenge is the latest in the battle over whether or not students should be required to wear masks in the classroom. The co-founder of Utah Concerned Coalition says laws preventing schools from forcing kids to wear masks negatively affects communities.
By restricting local schools from requiring universal masking, we're giving this aggressive virus every opportunity to find and infect the vulnerable among us, including our children.
However, Republican officials have argued that there are downsides to young students wearing a covering over their nose and mouth all day, and they assert that parents should decide what their kids do. This while health and education groups argue that routine vaccinations are behind schedule. But the ones they're referring to are not for the CCP virus or coronavirus, but are for diseases like polio and measles. A Georgia pediatrician underscores the possibility that an overtaxed healthcare system might be having trouble keeping up with immunizations.
There is a backlog around the country and here in Georgia where pediatricians just are trying their best to get these kids in and get them caught up on vaccines.
Yet opponents to vaccines have historically argued that they contain toxic ingredients and that they're a tool Big Pharma uses to profit off of harming children. What's more, a new poll by the Associated Press shows that over half of Americans support mask and vaccine mandates for teachers as well as children. The poll found that 6 out of 10 support requiring the virus measures at schools. A school teacher in Michigan argues in favor of the requirements.
I don't think it's out of the question to ask people to do the right thing to help protect others, which is really what we're talking about here.
But opponents to vaccine mandates cite the serious and sometimes fatal side effects from the shot, and they say personal health choices should not be decided by the government. All this while school districts that have disregarded Florida and Texas's ban on mask mandates bring students back to school. But some students in Florida have been put in isolation over new virus protocols. Parents in Flagler County were notified that their children were put on a list because they may have come in contact with someone who was infected. And in preparation for the first day of classes at Miami-Dade School, the superintendent explains that people must wear masks inside the building, but only a 3-foot social distance is required. And now New Jersey is requiring teachers and state workers to get the vaccine. The state's governor made the announcement after the FDA approved the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, but the state will allow people who opt out of the vaccine to use a COVID test as an alternative. Hundreds of people in Texas, including many parents and doctors, took a stand against vaccine mandates this weekend. They called it a freedom fight, saying they're not going to take it. NTD's Miguel Moreno has that story.
If you are a healthcare worker, if you are a doctor, a nurse, a respiratory therapist, a nuclear technologist, if you work in the cafeteria, if you clean the toilets, if you are security, if you are administration, strike. Rather than waiting for them to strike at you and threaten your job, go on strike.
Dr. Richard Fleming was one among multiple speakers at Freedom Fight hosted by Texans for Vaccine Choice. Hundreds of rallygoers showed up this Saturday. The organization isn't vaccine passport friendly.
In addition to setting the national standard for vaccine choice advocacy, we are proud to have 4 pieces of legislation signed into law, including the incredible accomplishment of banning vaccine passports in the state of Texas.
The speakers touched on a variety of issues. A father said the vaccine killed his son, JR.
My son received the vaccine and he died a few days later. The only explanation that was given to me was an enlarged heart. So if I have anything to say to anybody, look down at your child. It's not worth the risk. I mean, you see your baby right now, you might not see your baby tomorrow. I have to live with that the rest of my life. I love the hell out of my country, but I don't trust my government anymore.
The push to vaccinate is strong in the U.S., but doctors like Amy Offutt gave an account of her success in treating COVID patients with her own care plan using FDA-approved medication.
As of this week, my practice has treated approximately 1,200 acutely ill patients as old as 98 years old. We have less than 20 hospitalizations and 0 deaths for patients if they presented before the 7th day. So why isn't this information spreading like fire?
Dr. Fleming cited the FDA's own rules on emergency use authorization.
If you have treatments, you can't have EUAs, by definition.
Other speakers tried to inspire the fighting spirit in the audience, specifically men.
Women, listen, you've emasculated men. We're in an hour where we need men of God to step up. Yeah. I know you've got marital issues. Your children are depressed. I know there's strife in your family. I know. This is why you fight. You buckle down and you fight. You look at every guy next to you and you say, man of God, stand up. And if he's not a man of God, you call it out of him. You call the warrior out of the guy.
In different states, employees or students have filed lawsuits over vaccine mandates, one of the latest in New Jersey against Rutgers University. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
And if you'd like to hear additional speakers from this event, you can watch the rally in its entirety by going to our website, ntd.com. More than 1,300 firefighters are working to contain a dozen large California wildfires. The blazes have destroyed hundreds of homes and forced thousands of people to flee. NTD's Andrew Thomas reports.
California state officials say fire danger will remain elevated through midweek. That's despite no red flag warnings for critical conditions in the north of the state on Monday.
That doesn't change the fact that we have many large damaging fires that are ongoing, particularly in the north part of the state, and they're going to continue to grow and get bigger. But it does allow for us to move resources.
The Dixie Fire has burned more than 1,130 square miles in the northern Sierra Nevada and southern Cascades. More than 1,200 buildings have burned. Containment has increased to 40%.
Today, we are almost 3 times the number of acres burned in California over our 5-year average. Almost 3 times over. A lot of acreage is burning. Fires are burning in ways that nobody has seen before.
Southwest of Lake Tahoe, the Caldor Fire has destroyed over 440 buildings. Cal Fire said the potential for large wildfires will continue to be low in Southern California. Moist ocean air has been keeping skies cloudy and temperatures cooler than normal. California's timber, brush, and grasslands have created a potent fuel bed for several wildfires raging across the state.
Mother Nature is in control, and we are doing everything we can to save your lives and property.
The state's fires are among more than 90 large active blazes in the U.S. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
A lot of people have been moving to Florida and Texas, but there's a lesser-known area in Colorado that's experiencing a population boom, a boom so big the city's needed to find more water. Here's NTD's Miguel Moreno with that story.
You ever heard of Greeley, Colorado?
I've always said for years it was the best kept secret in the Front Range.
Not such a secret anymore. People are flocking to Greeley. The Census Bureau says the city and surrounding Weld County grew by more than 30% in 10 years, one of the fastest growing regions in the country. Cafe owner Amy Hudson says she's watched the city balloon since the 90s.
Some of the best parts about living in Greeley is that it is a small town feel, but still a pretty big city.
Right now, about 109,000 people live there, and it's expected to double in about 30 years. Relatively low housing prices, a major meat packing plant, and a mix of jobs in energy, healthcare, and agriculture are drawing people in. But the bigger the boom, the more demand there is for water. And Colorado's going through a drought, so the city's voted to buy an aquifer. This underground layer of rock and water will provide H2O for generations to come.
In essence, the transaction, we issued the seller, Wingfoot Water Resources, credits. Wingfoot sells those credits to developers. Developers turn in the credits to Greeley, and we issue them water service.
Colorado River and Northern Sierra reservoirs have dropped to historic lows. Last week, Adel Haj Khalil, the general manager of Southern California's Metropolitan Water District, said, "The Colorado River is sending us a clear message: conserve, reuse, and recycle." The Colorado River has been a lifeline for Southern California for more than 80 years. The state has issued an alert to residents, urging them to conserve water. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
In his final public remarks as governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo said the findings from the state investigation into his conduct were not fair. The probe concluded that he sexually harassed at least 11 women.
You know me. I am a fighter. And my instinct is to fight this because it is unfair and unjust in my mind.
On his final day in office as New York governor, Andrew Cuomo on Monday delivered a defiant farewell address, complaining about what he called the unfairness of the state investigation that concluded he sexually harassed at least 11 women.
The Attorney General's report was designed to be a political firecracker on an explosive topic, and it worked.
The damning report, released on August 3rd by New York Attorney General Letitia James, a fellow Democrat, hastened a disgraceful end to Cuomo's decade as governor, long marked by a bruising, pugnacious approach to deal-making that left him bereft of allies. In pre-recorded remarks, Cuomo nevertheless reiterated that the right thing to do was to step down. Although they no longer plan to impeach Cuomo, lawmakers in the state assembly said they would still publish a report once they conclude their investigation. And the issue of why Cuomo's administration withheld data regarding the true extent of nursing home deaths from COVID is also being investigated. Cuomo leaves office at 11:59 p.m., with Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul due to be sworn in at 12:01 a.m., becoming the first woman to hold the state's highest office.
Disgraced movie mogul Harvey Weinstein is once again facing a sexual assault charge in California. According to court documents, a grand jury reinstated the recently dismissed charge. Earlier in the month, a Los Angeles Supreme Court judge dismissed count 5, sexual battery. Weinstein's defense team argued that the statute of limitations had run out. Weinstein pleaded not guilty to the sexual assault charges in Los Angeles. He was found guilty last year in New York of first-degree criminal sexual act and third-degree rape. He was sentenced to a 23-year prison sentence term in New York, but was extradited in July to California to face trial 3. In a case of art imitating life, the Halloween classic It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, is alive and well at the Kentucky State Fair. Good grief, Charlie might say if he saw this 1,663-pound gargantuan gourd raised by Floyd County farmer Dwight Stone. It beats the previous Kentucky State giant pumpkin record by just under 70 pounds. There was stiff competition this year from other Titanic jack-o'-lanterns, but the Floyd County grown gourd takes the cake, or pumpkin pie in this case. Champion Dwight Stone isn't giving away his growing secrets or even saying how he managed to get the great pumpkin to the fairgrounds. Up next, during a visit to Singapore, Vice President Kamala Harris denounces China's coercion in the South China Sea. She pledged that Washington would pursue a free and open Indo-Pacific. And top companies from multiple industries in China suffer a loss of around $3 trillion. That's comparable to 1.5 times the value of Apple. The plunge is a consequence of Beijing's recent harsh controls across the country. All that and more here on NTD News.
Hi folks, Joe Namath here with a new message about your Medicare benefits. You may be entitled to transportation, meals, and expanded coverage for dental work that includes extractions, fillings, and dentures, all at no additional cost. Plus, depending on your zip code, you may be entitled to the Medicare benefit that adds money to your Social Security check every single month. Call and get everything you deserve. Call now. It's free.
I'm on a fixed income, so I called to get money added to my Social Security check. They helped me so much.
I called to save money on copays, get prescriptions, transportation, and my dental work covered. I couldn't believe I was spending money I don't have to spend.
Millions of people have trusted the Medicare Coverage Helpline, and you can too. Call now. It's free.
Call 1-800-764-1930. That's 1-800-764-1930 now.
Secure, the true solution for your digital privacy and security. Secure is a private and secure messaging and email solution hosted in Switzerland, using military-grade encryption and Swiss privacy laws, giving you true privacy. Secure is 100% private and does not collect or sell any of your personal data. Secure's Helix technology connects you securely to our Swiss servers without the need of a VPN, guaranteeing privacy and security for all your communications. Secure Messenger doesn't require your phone number or any personal data that hackers target. Chat by Invites allows you to chat privately and securely with anyone outside of your secure network without the need for others to download Secure. Secure Send offers you a private and secure way to email anyone outside of Secure. You won't find this level of privacy or security on any other email or instant messaging application. Visit secure.com. Regain and protect your privacy today.
Territorial conflict in the South China Sea has been a regional flashpoint for years. Commenting on the situation, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris spoke in Singapore Tuesday. She blamed Beijing for endangering peace in the contested region. Here's more.
We know that Beijing continues to coerce, to intimidate, and to make claims to the vast majority of the South China Sea.
In a speech on Tuesday, Vice President Kamala Harris accused Beijing of coercion and intimidation in the South China Sea. She made the comment while visiting Singapore, the first stop on her Southeast Asia trip. Harris called the Chinese Communist regime's claims in the disputed waters unlawful.
Beijing's actions continue to undermine the rules-based order and threaten the sovereignty of nations. The United States stands with our allies and partners in the face of these threats.
She referred to a landmark international arbitration in 2016, which denied the Chinese regime's territorial claims in the South China Sea, but Beijing rejected the ruling. In recent years, the Chinese regime has been rapidly building up its military presence to support its claims in the region. Harris sought to reassure America's friends and like-minded nations in the Indo-Pacific.
The United States will pursue a free and open Indo-Pacific that promotes our interests and those of our partners and allies.
Her speech also touched on a number of other issues, including the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. She insisted the decision was courageous and right.
Vice President Kamala Harris is en route to Vietnam after a 3-hour delay. Her flight from Singapore was late because of a possible anomalous health incident in Hanoi. That's how the government usually refers to the mysterious Havana syndrome that has sickened hundreds of U.S. officials over the past few years. There's still no explanation for the illness. It's known to cause a mix of sensory experiences and physical symptoms. The U.S. Embassy in Hanoi says after careful assessment, Harris decided to continue on to Vietnam for the last leg of her Asia trip. Many top companies across industries in China are seeing a major plunge in their market value. It's a consequence of Beijing's recent wave of tightened control. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has more on the story.
China's top companies lost about $3 trillion compared with their peak value this year. That's about 1.5 times the size of Apple and far exceeds most countries' GDP. Beijing's tightened control is making these companies' market value fall. These enterprises include consumer businesses, pharmaceuticals, and internet-related businesses. Among them, video sharing app Kuaishou suffered a decline of over 80%. A rice wine company that held first place in China's domestic share market suffered a price drop of over 40% this year. And China's leading pharmaceutical company lost half of its market value in this wave of control. And the list goes on. The CCP's most recent blow is for the education and training industry. Stock prices for these entities outside the Chinese market immediately plunged. Analysts say that's because investors sense further danger to these companies from the CCP's political suppression. Inclement weather in northern China this weekend, causing dark skies and torrential rains in Shaanxi province on Saturday. 2 counties there suffered flood and landslide damage, with many residents cut off from electricity, water, and cell phone signal. In Mian County, part of a local river embankment burst under pressure from the heavy rains, causing a 50-foot breach. One resident explained that much of the local flooding came from that breach, which quickly soaked the area.
Some houses collapsed, there's landslides, and trees collapsed. Then the traffic is difficult, with many places are out of water and electricity.
Chinese media reported that flooding flowed through farmland into the county's downtown area. 6 main roads were severely inundated, with water measuring around 2 feet deep in the worst-hit areas. More than 1,000 cars in the county were also submerged, and at least 60,000 people are out of water and electricity. Elsewhere in Sichuan County, floodwaters released from a local reservoir led to similar destruction. One video shows a section of collapsed road in the county, leaving behind a major road hazard.
It's raining heavily. Sichuan's reservoir has discharged large amounts of floodwaters, and the country has been affected.
According to Chinese weather reports, more torrential rain is expected to hit the region in the coming days.
Still to come, Barcelona carefully welcomes back tourists to the iconic Catalonian city. Tourists enjoy the city's architecture, parks, cafes, and restaurants. And theater actors are forced into a new way of performing for a theater festival during the CCP virus pandemic. Find out more in just a minute.
If you're like most of us, you're probably getting fed up with the nonsense that's going on in the banking system. Did you know that top U.S. banks have recently amended their depositor terms and conditions to include the words bank failure and what's required of you in 24 hours if, or should I say when, it happens? Don't get blindsided by your bank. Call GSI Exchange today to pick up your complimentary copy of the Bank Failure Survival Guide at 866-424-2382. We'll also send you the required format to file with your bank within 24 hours of their failure, which is now required by the top banks to avoid freezing of your funds. Yes, the top banks can now freeze your money. The world is in a strange place, and banks are constantly changing the rules. So stay on top of the current events that really matter by calling GSI Exchange and requesting your free guide at 866-424-2382.
Are you looking for a news source that does not spin the truth, doesn't push any false narratives, and instead presents you with the facts and lets you make up your own mind? Then go to readepic.com and try the Epic Times newspaper for yourself. It's pure honest journalism that's based in traditional values.
Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
The Tokyo Paralympics kicked off today with a fireworks display as part of the opening ceremony. No spectators are allowed in venues during the Games, as was the case with the recently concluded Olympics, in a bid to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Organizers said the opening ceremony was attended by about 3,400 members of team delegations, 800 Games stakeholders and guests of honor, and 2,400 members of the media. The Paralympics are set to run until September 5th. The pandemic's halt on international travel damaged Spain's tourism industry in 2020. But now cities like Barcelona are offering visitors a cautious welcome this summer. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
Tourists are slowly coming back to Barcelona. Last summer was a disaster for the local economy, as the city's tourism industry came to a virtual standstill. Following months of intermittent closures, the city's iconic Sagrada Familia Basilica reopened with a limited number of daily visitors. Park Güell, one of the city's largest green spaces, was also a popular spot before the pandemic. It was already limiting the number of tourists that could enter, and now that daily quota has been reduced due to pandemic restrictions. But Parisian tourist Vincent Harel is delighted to have crossed the border.
This feels freer than France. What else can I tell you? And to top it off, we have the sun, so it's much nicer to come to Spain to visit Barcelona.
Barcelona is home to a number of preserved architectural treasures of its own past. In the Barri Gothic, Roman remains coexist with churches, museums, and apartment buildings from the early Middle Ages. These sites are popular with both Spanish and international tourists.
There is a lot of local tourism from Spain. International tourism is subject to air travel regulations, among other restrictions, and to what each country decides. But we are working under a recovery context, and at the same time rethinking the future model for tourism here in Barcelona.
In 2019, nearly 12 million tourists came to the city. In 2020, that number dropped to 3.3 million.
I think it's still a very open city. There's a lot of still the terraces are open. Most of the parks and the museums are open, which is great. I think the limited capacity is very smart with the pandemic going on. So I think it's an excellent city still, and the tourism is still going with all of the restrictions that need to be in place with the pandemic.
Spain is the world's second most visited country and welcomed 3.2 million tourists from January to May. But those figures surged in June with 2.3 million arrivals, the best monthly figure since the start of the pandemic. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
NASA is delaying a spacewalk at the International Space Station this week. One of the astronauts scheduled to head outside the space station apparently has a medical issue that NASA is not revealing. Officials announced the postponement less than 24 hours before Mark Vande Hei was supposed to float outside. They say Vande Hei is dealing with a minor medical issue. They say it's not an emergency, but didn't provide further details. Vande Hei has been at the space station since April and is expected to remain there until next spring. He and a crewmate from Japan's space program were supposed to go out Tuesday to install a bracket for new solar wings. NASA says the work can wait, and that crew members can continue with other work. Quick-thinking Australian motorists guided a stranded black Swan and Cygnet to safety Monday across a busy freeway in Perth. The Swans had gotten stuck on the inside of the Kwinana Freeway on the Narrows Bridge during the morning peak traffic. The man who captured the footage of the Swans said a tow truck driver stopped and put his lights on to to warn oncoming traffic. That's before shepherding the swans across the multiple lanes. The tow truck driver, with assistance from another motorist, managed to guide the swans off the road in front of halted traffic. Adelaide-based theater performer Joanne Hartstone was better prepared than many for August's festival bonanza, as lockdown delays have meant that Edinburgh's Fringe coincides for the first time with Hollywood's rival event.
Alrighty. The Edinburgh Fringe and the Hollywood Fringe festivals are coinciding for the first time this August. Luckily, Australia-based theatre performer Joanne Hartstone knows a way to perform at both. She and her partner Tom set up a virtual theatre platform called Black Box Live, where their shows are available live and on demand.
Obviously, live performance has been really difficult to achieve for a multitude of reasons. So we have pivoted into the digital world, and we are embracing hybrid digital theatre, which means theatre for a live audience, both in the room and also online, watching from home or wherever they may be in the world.
I was nervous. I don't mind admitting it. Hell, I was terrified. 5 minutes is the shortest window in which you can sell yourself.
The couple hopes this new way of working will make theatre more accessible and able to compete in the growing streaming space, while also saving travel expenses for creatives. But the new way of working doesn't come without its challenges. I'm both acting for camera and I'm also acting for stage, acting for a live audience. So thinking about my stagecraft, but also having to make sure that I'm hitting my marks very precisely, because I'm not just hitting a spotlight, I'm also hitting a camera angle. I'm also having to make eye contact with the camera at a certain point and following Tom's very clever tally light system so that I know which camera is live when, if I'm doing direct address. I'm having to consider so many more factors while still delivering, a good performance.
This year, NTD will hold its 9th International Classical Chinese Dance Competition. We sat down with a candidate to understand more about the costs and rewards of living the life of a professional dancer.
As a dancer, you're always moving around, and so you're always very fit, I guess. So usually when you eat, you could eat like whatever you want. So it doesn't really matter. You could just, eat whatever you want.
So the most exciting time is like lunchtime?
Yeah, when you eat.
19-year-old Michael Hu is from Feitian Academy of the Arts in upstate New York. Outside school, he goes on tour to perform around the world. His journey with classical Chinese dance didn't start out smoothly.
I didn't really like it back then.
The strict routine of a dancer didn't easily fit this teenage boy.
We normally wake up around 7 to 8, and then we have our morning routine, which is like stretching, kicking, bar, combo, off bar, and all that stuff. And then we have lunch. Sometimes we have academics or more dancing. And then we have dinner. And then at night we have more dancing again. And you can self-practice if you want at night.
All that stretching paid off when he started learning techniques. Like the technique Shen Dai Shou, where the body leads the hands, and Kwa Dai Tui, where the hips lead the legs. These skills were once lost, but they're believed to reach the highest realm of artistic refinement.
So you first use force from your body right here, then it goes all the way into your hands. It's like the girls' water sleeves. Like they do this, and then the sleeves go out.
He said this technique helps make the movements longer, bigger, and more beautiful on stage. Hu was born and raised in the US. He says at first it was hard for him to grasp some of the elements of classical Chinese dance.
The teachers are always talking about the inner meaning, but I'm like, where's the inner meaning?
But through studying it, entering the minds of characters he has to portray on stage, he began to get it. In the dance piece he prepared for this competition, Hu will play the best-known tragic hero in ancient China, Xiang Yu. The cultural icon is portrayed in countless Chinese novels, poems, operas, and dramas. The rebel leader's matchless might and bravery couldn't prevent his eventual defeat and suicide. And his life was said to prove the role of fate and the ancient Chinese belief that higher beings are in control.
Even though he was one of the greatest warriors of all time, but heaven just doesn't want him to claim the throne for the emperor. So he accepts that. So he tells his fellow soldiers that it is not that I can't fight, it is that heaven doesn't want me to win. And so, knowing this, he makes his last stand, and then he rather kill himself than surrender to his enemies.
Xiang Yu's overbearing pride is seen as his fatal shortcoming, and Hu says he keeps reminding himself about this.
One thing is you have to be humble, because there will always be something higher above you.
Step by step, literally, Hu starts to understand what his teacher meant by dance's inner meaning.
Like, one movement could be done in multiple ways, all based on each person's personality. Each movement you do, you're basically trying to put your emotions with your movements.
Hu says the dance training also improved his inner world, something his parents took note of.
They notice that you become a better person, more tolerant, because after all the stretching you've gone through, you know what a lot of pain could feel like. And so you start to think like small things, they're really not that painful, and that it's really nothing.
If you'd like to watch Michael Hu's dance and experience classical Chinese dance yourself, get your ticket for this year's competition at dance.ntdtv.com. The semifinals will take place at the Sugarloaf Performing Arts Center, New York State on September 4th, and the finals are on September 5th. You can also watch our live stream on ntd.com.
Thanks for watching. At NTD, we're honored to be your source for the news. Catch us again tonight at 6:30 Eastern. In New York City, I'm Kevin Hogan.
We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.